Musicians can get into contractual trouble for a variety of reasons. A lot of the time, it's by not reading, understanding, or caring what their contract actually says. As a result, disputes often lead artists to recording an album or a song for mere contractual rather than artistic purposes. The records made under such conditions are not always as awful as you might imagine, though sometimes, well, they absolutely are. In the video today, we're looking at 10 of them. Number 10. Mama and the Papas, People Like Us. The California Dreamin' Singers initially split in 1968. When their record label, Dunhill, was bought out by ABC, some bright spark realized that the group still owed them one more album. Having gone their separate ways, the former parents didn't really fancy doing the gig. Then they were threatened with a £1 million lawsuit. That promptly changed their minds. John Phillips took over most of the writing duties of People Like Us, overdubbing the work of his former bandmates whenever he could get them to record vocals. The finished product didn't really please anybody and sunk without a trace when it was released. As Mama Michelle Phillips memorably said of the record, it sounded like what it was: 4 people trying to avoid a lawsuit. Number 9. Rolling Stones, Cocker Blues. Back in 1969, the Rolling Stones weren't happy with their record label, Decca. They decided to form their own label, where they would presumably earn more money and be allowed to release increasingly disappointing albums over a 40-year period. There was only one problem. Before they got shot of Decca, they had to deliver one final track. Being the crazy rock and roll rebels that they weren't going to allow themselves to be held ransom by a legally binding contract that they signed in good faith. No siree, not the Rolling Stones. Instead, they recorded the most commercially unpalatable song they could think of. It was called Schoolboy Blues, but it's more commonly known by the title Cocksucker Blues due to the chorus where future British knight Sir Michael Jagger croons like a perverted Bing Crosby, "Where can I get my cock sucked? Where can I get my ass fucked?" Decca quite understandably decided it best not to release the track. Then the internet came along, as it's well known to do. Feel free to listen to it, just do note that it does have not safe for work lyrics. Number 8. Van Morrison's contract-breaking sessions. After a pretty unhappy couple of years with his label Bang Records in the mid-1960s, Van Morrison, he wanted out. They demanded that he deliver some short and poppy stuff like Brown Eyed Girl, while he wanted to release 11-minute renditions of lion impersonations, which he actually did on the album St. Dominic's Preview. The singer became so distraught with his label situation that he slipped into financial trouble and had problems finding gigs. Just when it seemed Morrison might never deliver on his musical potential, Warner Brothers stepped in and bought out his deal with Bang Records. There was still one small contractual detail though. Morrison was obliged to record exactly 36 songs for his old label, who would also continue to earn royalties off anything he released for the first year after leaving Bang. Not a patient man at the best of times, Van did the only thing he could think of. He recorded more than 30 songs in a single recording session on an out-of-tune guitar about subjects as diverse as ringworm, blowing your nose, a dumb guy named George, and whether he wanted to eat Danish or a sandwich. Bang Records, who seemed to think that the songs were below the quality of Morrison's regular output, imagine that, deemed that the Bizarre collection was unfit for release. The tracks would eventually see the light of day in the mid-1990s and remain some of the weirdest and often funniest music ever recorded by a mainstream artist. The tracks are available on Spotify if you truly desire to hear a grown man sing about sandwiches. Number 7. Prince, Chaos and Disorder. Not many artists get so annoyed with their record label that they change their name and start writing slave on their face. But Prince Rogers Nelson was not many artists. After some unhappy years with Warner Brothers, the artist was desperate to end his 18 years at the label. For his final release, he decided that releasing something of decent quality was not for him. Instead, he cobbled together Chaos and Disorder, a collection of dodgy leftovers that finally freed him from the vile clutches of Warner. The album was not his finest moment, nor did he ever intend it to be. With the contract duly fulfilled, Prince promptly celebrated with Emancipation, a 36-song triple album that actually didn't stink. Number 6. Ben Folds, One Down. Ben Folds has delighted in telling the story of the song on stage over the years. Before he started getting all famous and such, he signed a publishing contract that he later regretted. It required him to pen a very specific amount of songs a year, right down to the decimal point. One Down is one of a number of songs he dutifully churned out to meet the contract, and it details the struggle and silliness of being party to such a legally binding document. The lyrics directly address the ridiculous situation of having to write 0.6 of a song, as well as the temptation to give his publishing company something a bit terrible. With not a little irony, he sings, "One down and 3.6 tomorrow, and I'm out of here." People tell me, "Ben, just make up junk and turn it in," but I could never quite bring myself to write a bunch of shit. Number 5. The Band, Islands. In the mid-1970s, Robbie Robertson decided that he'd had enough of the wild, energy-sapping struggle of life on the road. He preferred taking drugs with Martin Scorsese instead. Therefore, he decided to just call it a day with the band. His last ever gig with the group, entitled The Last Waltz, would be an incredible all-star send-off to one of America's finest groups. There was only one problem. Before the concert recording could be released on their new label Warner, their previous label, Capitol, needed one final record. Islands was hastily strung together, leading to an uneven, occasionally sloppy, and sometimes somber record. It's not quite them at their peerless best, but it's also not awful. Their one attempt at a seasonal song, Christmas Must Be Tonight, is borderline. Islands would be the last album featuring the full lineup of the group. Number 4. Buffalo Springfield, Last Time Around. Renowned for drug abuse, infighting, and egos the size of Mount Rushmore, it is no surprise that Buffalo Springfield, featuring the likes of Neil Young and Stephen Stills, never threatened the Rolling Stones in the longevity stakes. By the time Last Time Around, the group's third album, was released in 1968, Buffalo Springfield had disbanded. Nowhere on the album do all members of the band appear on the same track. Even the cover photo of the band is a montage, with Neil Young being tacked onto a photo of the rest of the group. It was compiled by Richard Foray and Jim Messina from tracks recorded by various band members over the previous year to fulfill Buffalo Springfield's contract with ATCO Records. Despite the troubled gestation, it is an often lovely and occasionally brilliant record. Number 3. Frank Zappa, Läther. In early 1977, Frank Zappa wanted out of his deal with Warner Brothers and recorded Läther, an 8-sided, 3-hour quadruple album of brand new material. He was told, however, that he needed to deliver 4 separate albums to fulfill his contract, so he reformatted the whole thing into the 4 required albums. Warner wasn't having it though, and still wouldn't release the records. They also wouldn't pay Zappa and refused to let him leave the label. In the pre-internet age, Frank did the only thing he could do. He took one of the test pressings to K-Rock in Los Angeles and played the whole set on air as an exclusive. He also asked his fans to record the whole thing, thus giving his permission to bootleg a record that wouldn't come out in its original form for another 30 years. Number 2. David Bowie, Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. After the former space alien released Lodger, he had assumed his contract with RCA was up, or at least that's what he hoped. However, he was counting the double live album Stage as 2 records, and his record company wasn't. Since record executives are always right, they demanded one final release. This release was Scary Monsters and Super Creeps. This album is actually home to some of David Bowie's most famous and beloved songs, including Ashes to Ashes. Number 1. Marvin Gaye, Here My Dear. Unusually, Marvin Gaye's Here My Dear was not an album recorded to appease a grumpy record label, although it would turn out to be. Rather, he was trying to please both the courts and an unhappy ex-wife. The legendary crooner and his missus, Anna Gordy, had become estranged. Marvin's remarkable cocaine habit and extravagant lifestyle meant he couldn't afford to pay her any alimony. Therefore, a deal was struck. Half the royalties of Gaye's next album would go to Anna. As you might imagine, Gaye didn't really fancy making another masterpiece like What's Going On. Instead, he hoped to turn in something a bit rubbish, or lazy bad, as he put it. Of course, you can never predict when genius will strike. Once Gaye got going, he just couldn't help but make one of the most beautifully candid and emotionally raw breakup albums ever. It tracked his current mindset and the couple's relationship in an often strikingly direct manner. Sample lyric would be, "Why do I have to pay attorney fees? This is a joke. I need a smoke." Oddly enough, upon its release, neither critics or fans were overwhelmed, and the album fared quite poorly, just as Gaye had originally hoped. Today, it's rightly regarded as a masterpiece. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do give us a thumbs up below, and do not forget to subscribe. Got brand new videos just like this every day of the week. For more from me, why not check out my other channel called Biographics? You will find that linked to below. And as always, thank you for watching.